everyone, this is Des, and you are listening to the Wellness Project powered by Spotlight Coalition. I have some very exciting news to share. For the first time ever, I am offering a group program. I realize that many people are stressed, burned out, overwhelmed, and just plain exhausted. Sadly, many people don't have support from others, a healthy outlet, or a way to cope with the stresses of their everyday lives. If you can relate, then don't hesitate to sign up for the Mindful Monday Power Up group. This 4-week group will not only give you the support and encouragement you've been craving, but it will also provide you with a safe space to express yourself, healthy coping skills, practical tips you can implement into your daily life, and that sense of community you've been longing for. Create a life you love. Sign up for the waitlist today. You can find the link in the show notes, and I can't wait to see you there. Thank you so much for joining me today. Today, we are hearing from Beth Gatlin. Beth struggled with depression and anxiety, which led her down the path of using substances to escape from her pain, and she soon found herself battling addiction. Beth discusses how depression and anxiety affected her life and her relationships. She discusses her addiction and what helped her to get sober and to reach out to others for help. I'm really looking forward to hearing this powerful conversation that I have with Beth. She gives so many tips and strategies and things that can help you if you're struggling with depression or anxiety or addiction. And she also discusses escaping and how to put boundaries around that, whether it's using substances or watching TV every day for hours on end. This is an important episode, and I know you're going to gain a lot from it, so thank you so much for tuning in. Now let's speak with Beth about her experiences with depression, anxiety, and addiction. All right, everyone. I am here with Beth Gatlin. Beth, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm happy to be here.
I'm really looking forward to speaking with you. So, for our listeners, can you just give us an introduction to who you are, what you've been through, your experiences, and how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, absolutely. In short, for the introduction, I'm just an average person. I grew up with some, little traumas, a few big traumas. But overall, I thought the way that I grew up was fairly normal. I had some issues throughout teenage years that manifested in adulthood that I eventually realized was depression and anxiety. It just ended up being such a huge problem for me. I lived fairly normal to the outside world, but inside it was so dark and so hard that I ended up being a normal mom of two, who worked a job, had a home. I was just your average person. And then all of a sudden, I'm on really some hardcore drugs. I couldn't take care of my kids. I had to leave. I left them with their dad, and I left and got into the world of drugs for a short time. And it was all just because I wanted to die. I felt worthless. I felt broken, and I had no idea how to fix anything. And I was so full of shame that I couldn't bring myself to ask for help from people who cared about me. All that happened, and I ended up having a moment where I decided, you know what, I'm going to try some new things, because if I'm going to kill myself, I have to have the integrity intact that I tried everything I can, because I got two babies I love more than anything. And I ended up talking about things with the drug addicts around me at first. And there was just a new openness I had never experienced in my life. I was around 26, 27 years old at that time. I had never spoke about anything that I started speaking about with them. And even though we were on drugs and doing crazy things, there was an openness inside of me still that was healing that I had never felt before. Just exploring and letting off my chest all of these things I had went through. And in short, that experience led me to a bit of a spiritual experience, a bit of a spiritual awakening. I basically said, I don't know if there's a God. I don't know what I believe, but if there is a God, please let me die, or I need help. Like, I've been talking about it. It's not fixed me. I've been searching. I've been doing drugs. I've been doing everything. I lived right for so many years. That didn't help. So if there's a God, please help me. I need some sort of miracle. And within a few weeks of this sort of conversation with people, this sort of conversation with God, and this exploration I had inside of myself, it took one moment where I had something click inside of my mind and my body. And all of a sudden, I realized that I didn't have to feel that shame, and that everything I went through did not make me disgusting or broken or a horrible person, that I could actually let it all go. I could forgive everyone involved. I could forgive myself. It was like a cloak of darkness left my body, and this warm light and love just swarmed through my veins. And for the first time, I decided I wanted to live. I didn't understand what happened. I didn't care if I understood it. It felt good and it felt pure and it felt real more than any drug I had ever been on. From that point on, it was asking for help from people who cared about me. And it was more self exploration. It was more, what is this spiritual life all about? And I got my babies back and have been building a life ever since. And I like to say that I'm your average person because I don't come on podcasts. I'm writing a book. I don't write a book because I feel special, but I'm your average person. And I feel like the average person needs more average people speaking out about their issues and about their triumphs so that they can realize that it doesn't take anyone special to heal and to get a miracle.
Oh, yes, absolutely. I so fully agree. And that's why I've been wanting to interview people like yourself, because I think it's so important for people to hear from people like them what they've been going
Mm-hmm.
through and things that they can relate to and things that have helped. So thank you so much for sharing your story. It's so, so powerful. I think
Yeah.
it's really going to be helpful for people to hear.
Yeah. Thank you.
So I want to take it back a little bit to your childhood, your teen years. Can you pinpoint any sort of experience or something you went through that created that shame, those feelings that you had that you were battling, that depression, that anxiety?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was adopted between 2 and 3 years old. Things started shifting for me with my family. And I have a few memories that stand out that allow me to sort of pinpoint things. But for the most part, the adoption was fairly peaceful. I was adopted by someone I knew. Things surrounding my adoption was because of some sexual molestation that was accused. And just a long story short, that doesn't really have much to do with anything. I ended up being adopted by someone I knew, and I was able to keep in touch with some of my family from my biological side. For the most part, if you have to be adopted, I was a pretty blessed adopted kid. I was able to see my biological mother and my sisters, who I loved more than anything, but still have this great new family that wanted me and that put me in a bit of a better situation. But even with all of that, that seemed like it should be great, I was very confused. And I think it took about a year for me to really understand, like, wow, I'm not going back to my mom. I don't think I ever asked too many questions, back in, I'm only 30, but still back when my childhood, a child to be seen and not heard sort of was the mentality. You don't ask too many questions. You just want to be good and do your thing. That was the way I grew up. Just be good, do my thing. And that was it. I really didn't get taught how to conversate about things that were serious. And I really didn't see people talking about things that were uncomfortable or serious. So I think I just sort of, took that as a hint. We don't talk about things. So I remember one night laying in bed when I was about 4, and it really hit me that I'm not going back to my mom. What is wrong? What did I do? And I specifically said out loud as I was crying, I hate Gail. That's her name. And then it broke my heart that I even said something like that. And I
Mm.
started crying even more. And I was like, I don't understand what's wrong with me. Like, why am I feeling these feelings? Like, I couldn't put words to anything. I didn't know it was anger or sadness or confusion. I had no idea what I was feeling. I just felt a big pain in my heart, and that was it. It was like in that moment and that experience that I felt like I was broken for the first time. Like, these feelings are not meant to happen. And I kind of felt like maybe that was the reason I was given away, because I'm a broken person, or maybe if I let these people know that adopted me, if I have these feelings, they won't want me anymore. It just became a belief system that these feelings are not for me. They're not supposed to be here. And if I let people know I feel these feelings, then they won't love me anymore. And so over time, it sort of just developed into, I'm not worthy of feeling anything negative. I'm not worthy of asking for what I need. If I have an issue or if something's happening to me, I can't speak about it. I need to change. It must be my fault. Everything's my fault and no communication. I always would just shut down throughout my life emotionally. There was not many tantrums or outbursts throughout puberty, even teenage years. Like my mama was having none of that anyway. She was a good mama, but you're not going to have an attitude with her. It never surfaced enough for people to realize there was some major things going on inside of me.
That makes sense. I feel like a lot of kids fall through the cracks because of that. They do really well in school. They're not a behavioral issue, and people don't realize that they're battling some really deep stuff. And I
Yeah.
feel like those are the kids that fall through the cracks. It's always the ones that kind of act out, cause trouble in school, aren't doing their schoolwork, things like that. Those are the ones that receive help and the attention. And kids like you, the ones who are doing what they're supposed to be doing, getting good grades, things like that, they're the ones that are kind of forgotten because people don't realize that they may be having a hard time.
Yeah, absolutely. I even remember specifically like hearing my mom or my sisters or my aunt tell me just how awesome it was that I handled life with such grace that, things would happen and I never had, too many issues and I was such a good kid. Like I remember being praised for how well I handled things. And I was always the child who was like deemed an old soul, so like I took pride in I can handle anything. It eventually
Okay.
became, a strength, I thought.
Right. That makes a lot of sense. And I'm sure that too, maybe because you had that kind of identity, maybe even placed on you, it might have been even harder to ask for help and let people know that, hey, I am having a hard time because it would go
Yeah,
against the identity that people have given you.
absolutely. And I love that identity. I still struggle. I still
Mm,
struggle with letting it be known I need help in certain avenues, but that's also why I make an effort to be vulnerable so that it can, manifest in those areas, hopefully.
I definitely give you a lot of credit because that is a very difficult thing to do and for people to do. And that's why I think it's so important to talk to people about their struggles and asking for help to let everybody know it is okay and it doesn't make you weak. There's nothing wrong with you. Everybody needs help sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with that at all.
I ended up dabbling throughout my late teen years. I dabbled like with smoking marijuana, like doing some pills just here and there, mainly just experimenting. I had a pretty decent childhood with little T traumas here and there. But then eventually, senior year, I think it was, my dad had left my mom and I. And so, it was like one of those big T's that happened. They brought everything else to surface. Like
Oh,
all of
okay.
those years I had been holding everything in towards my end of high school year, that was it for me. Like I went a little wild, and my mom was so distraught. She wasn't aware too much of what was going on with me. It was lots of experimenting with sex for the first time, experimenting with all kinds of drugs, especially after I graduated high school. That year is when the depression really set in and anxiety set in to where if people could have seen anything, it would have been that year for sure. There was just so much going on with my family, like lots of divorces that year.
Oh,
Lots of
okay.
divorces that year and just everything topsy turvy. And then, of course, I'm leaving high school, trying to start college. Everything changed, and nobody could see exactly what was going on with me. I thought I was living my best life, partying and experimenting, boyfriends, like just, it was great, right?
Mm.
Within a year of leaving high school and all of the experimentation, I ended up getting pregnant. So I think
Oh,
that's
wow.
probably what saved me from anything as far as a real hard drug addiction before my late 20s. I ended up
Okay.
getting pregnant with my daughter. I used for that year, but then after that, if I did anything, I would smoke weed here and there. As a mom, I just would smoke weed here and there. But for the most part, I lived responsibly and I definitely lived for my children. I ended up having a daughter and a son eventually. I just spent my 20s being a mom and working. I just was like your average person.
Oh, wow. And when you were a teen, I know those are just the hardest years for people in their
Hmm.
lives. It's such a hard year already. And then you went through so much during your teen years. It brought up stuff from when you were younger. Was it a conscious decision to turn to drugs as like kind of a coping skill? I mean, what do you think made you turn to drugs to deal with your depression and anxiety?
I feel like I have a bit of a strange answer with that. It's so weird to me. But even in middle school, I had a dream that I had done, I think I smoked weed in my dream. And I had never seen people do drugs. My mom and dad didn't even smoke cigarettes. I might have seen my sister smoke cigarettes, or maybe once I saw them drink alcohol just once. So I was
Mm,
not around it. I knew my birth family had drug addicts in their family. I mean, it was told to me, genetic wise, you need to be safe. It might be passed down to you. Like, those were tidbits said to me about my biological family, and, making conscious effort not to go and experiment. But I remember early on having a very, like it drew me in. It drew me into being curious. I wanted to know what it felt like to feel something else. And I have no idea why. I really don't. Looking back on it, I think I was just meant to go down that road so that I could heal and be an example. Like, if I had to pick a reason, but I really just was drawn to it. I don't know why. I think I wanted to feel something else, and that was a way to feel something else.
at what age did you realize that? I know it had to do some with your pregnancy and giving birth, but at what age did you
Mhm.
realize that, hey, I'm going down a bad path. This isn't working. This isn't the life I want. I need some help. And how did you even begin to take a step to even get that help?
Yeah, it definitely happened in pregnancy, and there was a big shift. I had no awareness during that year beforehand. There was no thought process whatsoever that this is not the life I'm supposed to be living, and things can get worse. It was not in my head at all. In my mind, it was, I deserve to feel better. I need to do what I got to do. So when I became pregnant, I had lived with some family members, and it was not going to work out. I really wanted to get independent and, be what I wanted to be for my baby. And I ended up getting accepted into something called Florence Crittenton in Charlotte, because I was basically homeless at the time, or I was about to be very soon. And they accept homeless pregnant women. This is what it was roughly 10, 11 years ago. Applied, I got in, and I was able to go live with Florence Crittenton when I was roughly about 26 weeks pregnant. And it was the most incredible program ever. So, so good. They equipped you with therapy. If you go in and you do have drugs in your system, they put you through a detox, which thankfully I did not. I was able to quit smoking weed, and I didn't do any other drugs during that time. So my system was clean, but they would detox you if need be. And then they give you drug classes. They give you group therapy. They give you individual therapy. It's a very community oriented place. And then you also have a chance to get a job if you want, go to school if you want. They have vocational people to help you. And then they also let you work inside the place to earn sort of money, but it isn't money, but it's like tickets to where you would go and purchase your baby items. I was able to work for a crib, a bassinet. Gifts were given to you as well for the baby. So all kinds of clothes. By the time I left there, I was able to win a scholarship to get my own apartment, which they would pay for. I just had to pay $50 a month, and they paid for everything else. And I was able to get furniture for my whole home. I was able to get everything I needed for my baby. I left there with my life changed completely.
Wow, that sounds like such an incredible program.
Yeah, and it really gave me the knowledge to understand what drugs did to your brain. I just updated the therapist I had while I went there and sent her pictures of my kids, and was like, everything she taught me, even though I had that year of like really being hooked on drugs pretty badly and throughout the depression, it was still in my mind. I know this isn't for me, and I need to figure something out because of her. There was things that I wouldn't have understood or been aware of if it hadn't been for the knowledge she gave me.
Mm.
And probably I wouldn't have had any hope if it wasn't for her.
Oh, that's so amazing. I'm so glad that you had her.
She was the best for sure. That's the thing that I really like to point out, when you can get help and you feel good about it, get that help. And then if you go through another phase of like being down, whether it's drugs or mental illness, the shame is really what gets you and sucks you in. And the hopelessness, feeling like, wow, I was doing so good and now everything's bad again. The world is ending. But no, like everything you did good continues on even when you go through those rough times, and you can still use it to your advantage, and you can still have those bits of wisdom and carry it with you. You don't lose anything really. You're just going through a small phase.
I think that's really good for people to know. Also, I want to touch base on what were the things that you did? What steps did you take to heal, to get sober, to get your mental health issues under control? Were there any things that helped you that you implemented in your life? Any routines, any positive, healthy coping skills?
Yeah, for sure. During the first time, whenever I was pregnant with my daughter and then had her, there wasn't anything that I developed as far as a routine goes. I was still just kind of surviving. I wasn't quite awakened to who I was. I was still in need of more healing. There was just some bits of wisdom that needed to blossom more. Fast forward past my, in my mid 20s when I had that sort of spiritual awakening, I really awakened to who I was more than anything. I awakened to the kind of life I wanted. I awakened to there's hope to be who I want to be. I always had these desires inside of me, like to sing, to be a therapist one day, to be a specific kind of mother who loves their children in a certain kind of way. Like all of these desires in me once felt like a burden that I could never achieve. And now I'm like, wow, I can make my life look how I want it to look. When I decided that I can make my life how I wanted, I knew I needed some formulas of sorts. And really, this is just straight going off of my intuition. I would start reading books. The first book I read that really helped me was You Are a Badass.
Oh, yes, I've
um,
heard of that.
it was a great book. And I can't tell you exactly what she said, but I can tell you what I did when I read the book. It made me write down some thoughts and some fears I had and look at them on paper and then sort of dissect them into seeing the delusion behind them. And that really helped me understand that there's a perspective to everything and you can change your perspective. I think it's Wayne Dyer who says, when you change the way you look at things, things you're looking at change. And
Mm.
it really is true. Definitely reading books I would be drawn to. There was no formula for what books I picked. I just went with my gut. But I ended up getting into Gabby Bernstein, and her books have been an incredible source of healing for me. Brene Brown has been one in the last year that's been really great for me too. So reading up based on people who you want to maybe be like or who have that wisdom you're looking for, definitely putting like goodness into my mind and my body. When you go through the mental spirals of depression and anxiety, it's exhausting. I can't really read too much. So during those times, I try to maybe play a book that I've already read before. It's a little bit less daunting. If I know I've read the book before, I'm not going to feel the need to feel overwhelmed trying to read a whole book. So I'll play like an old book by Gabby that was once really soothing for me. And and it feels soothing again, just listening to 5 or 10 minutes. And I'm like, okay, I put goodness into my body. Now I can escape and watch some Netflix and not feel like I'm not doing good for myself.
Yeah, I love
Yeah,
that.
like
That's a really great tip.
yeah, that's my thing. I put boundaries around escaping because I don't want to get sucked into that lifestyle again. Escaping, whether it's through TV or drugs, is still escaping, and you don't escape your problems. They're just waiting for you. Besides that, I'd say 3 steps that I really try to incorporate in my life that keep me from the cycles, that are never ending. Putting goodness into my mind and body, even just 5 minutes during those cycles where I'm really down. And then I would say another one is really being purposeful about giving myself grace. Even with the example of escaping, that's giving myself grace. Even though my dishes need to be washed or have work to do, if I really am vulnerable with myself and I allow myself to feel what I'm feeling, if I need that moment in time to rest or to cry or to sit and play my guitar, even because that's soothing, then I need to give myself that because I just need to validate myself. Nobody else validates me, I've learned more than I validate myself. So I really try to be in that vulnerable state whenever I'm getting overwhelmed or overstimulated during those cycles of depression. And I want to validate myself by saying, okay, all this needs to be done, but I'm going to give myself grace. I'm not going to judge myself or call myself lazy. I'm going to give myself what I need. Here's this boundary of time. Let's do it. Let's just veg out. Or maybe even asking for help sometimes, that's the part I'm still working on. In the depression, it's very hard for me to ask for help. Right now, where I'm at is after the worst of the cycle is over and I'm a little bit coming up from it, I will talk about it and I'll be like, wow, it has been a struggle. I'm so embarrassed or I feel this way. And I live with a roommate right now She is just like heaven sent. I've never had anybody in my life that I've lived with before who has just been there for me in such a non-judgmental way. Like I'll sit there and judge myself for a moment talking to her, and she's like, "It's called mental health. It's called a break. You needed it. You got it. I've been here." And she has like she never judges whatsoever, and it's the most incredible experience I've ever had in my life.
Oh, that's amazing.
I would say just my last thing, it's been a very huge, huge step, and it's caused like the depression spirals to be less and less. I guess the best way to explain it is separating the depression from who I am, separating those negative thoughts that keep coming over and over again, often, separating it from who I am. And the way that I do that is if I have a thought saying, for instance, you're so stupid, you keep getting this work wrong, they're going to fire you, your clients are going to hate you. I work with my roommate, by the way, and that like these thoughts will come like, she's going to be so annoyed with you, she's going to be mad at you, she's going to kick you out, like she's going to hate you. It's all these crazy delusional thoughts over just a simple mistake that I would make. And so when I have these thoughts reoccur, I'll simply just talk back to it like it's a different person. And instead of like getting angry with it, I treat it like it's a child trying to protect me or something. I want to be sweet to it and gentle with it, but I need to be like super boundary setting with it. And so I'll just talk to it and be like, thank you for trying to help me, but this is not the truth. And I choose to see it a different way. And sometimes it'll look like I want to believe you, but I can't believe you. Like, I'll just be honest with where I'm at. Like, I see why you think that depression, but I'm going to choose to have faith that I'll feel better soon and not think these thoughts. Like, sometimes I can't flat out deny it because I'm not going to lie to myself. I know this sounds crazy, probably,
No,
but
no, this is amazing. This is really great.
okay, good. But yeah, like sometimes I don't want to lie to it. Obviously I know if I'm lying to myself, so I'll be honest. I want to think I'm ugly. I really want to think I'm ugly today, but I know I'm gonna feel better tomorrow. I know I'll feel better next week. I'm gonna do my hair. I'm gonna do my makeup. I know I'm gonna look banging, and it's okay. So this is just my system.
No, absolutely. I really love that. And something similar that I've taught people before, clients, is to name your critic, name your depression, to separate it, to
Mm,
help in the separation. So be like, oh, Jody, like, I don't want to hear that today. You can't talk to me like that. I'm not accepting that. So similar idea. Yeah. I think it's really,
that's
really,
awesome.
yeah, I think it's really
Yeah.
important to separate that depression, those intrusive thoughts from yourself, from your identity. I think that's
Yep.
a really, really great tip for people. That's really, thank you so much for all those ideas and those tips. Those are amazing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will say, the Zen Path to Depression, I never finished that book. It was during a spiral of depression that I started reading it, so I didn't finish it. But that's what gave me the idea that depression was separate, and it was huge. I never thought about it like that.
I'm going to put all these books that you've mentioned in the show notes. I think that people should definitely go and read them. I bought two Gabby Bernstein books, but I haven't read them yet, but they are on my bookshelf. So those are
Oh, yeah.
on my
Get
list to
ready.
read. Yeah, I can't wait. But I love that idea too that you mentioned of listening to the books, because you're right. Sometimes it is just exhausting to read, and then
Hmm.
you're just too tired. You can't comprehend it or absorb it. So I love that idea of
Yeah.
the audiobooks as well. That's a great tip.
Yeah. And You Are a Badass is actually free on YouTube. You can listen to
Is
it.
it really? Oh, I will find
Yes,
that
that's
link
how
as
I listen to
well.
it.
Oh, perfect. I will find that link and put it in the show notes as well. That's great. Okay. Thank you so much for those. All those links are going to be in the show notes, all those books that Beth recommended. So, Beth, as for loved ones, do you have any advice for those that have someone in their life that are battling depression or anxiety, addiction, suicidal ideation, anything that they can do to help or support that they can offer at all?
My sister, she has been like the most beautiful light of my life, and she's had to watch me. She's been older. She's about 12 years older than I am. So she feels like a mother at the same time, but the best friend vibes of a sister. She's had to watch me go through all of this and watch from a distance sometimes, and she's been the one to come save me many times. During one of my first drug binges, she ended up getting a call to come pick me up because I was just so distraught, and she didn't say a word to me. She picked me up. She let me sit quietly in my shame-filled zone that I had felt, and she fed me, and she didn't say anything to me. She sort of, she's very intuitive herself. She could tell where I was at. I think I felt like I would have broke if I had spoke about anything too much. And I was also coming off of a drug binge. What can you say to a person like that? I think she just sort of went with her gut and gave me what she felt I needed and ignored her fear, ignored her probably a little anger, ignored, the triggers in her, because we've all dealt with drug addicts in our life where that could trigger some anger inside of us if our best friend is all of a sudden going through, what looks like to becoming a drug addict. So I know she had to have felt so many things, and she put her feelings aside, gave me what I needed, gave me grace, and had faith that I would do what I needed to do eventually. And she did this many times before I finally was able to see what she saw inside of me and what she kept faith that I would eventually see. During these times, she did things for me that gave me a sense of pride about myself eventually. Like, for example, I messed up my hair during my drug addiction. I had beautiful long hair and I messed it up, and she took me to get my hair fixed. She took me to get my hair colored. She bought me an outfit. She made me feel good about myself again. She just instilled good feelings inside of me. I think there's a fine line between being an enabler and then instilling some goodness in someone's soul when you can. And, you just have to go with your gut on what that person needs. You just really have to be that intuitive person. If that's not you, if you're not intuitive, I would say, especially if it's depression, like say, for instance, if it's the mental health side more than the drug addict side, because that side's a little tricky. But the mental health part, if you ask them what they need and they say nothing, then literally sit and be there nothing with them, maybe for a short time, even. If you can see that they feel comfortable eventually, then you're doing the right thing. If you feel like it's causing more harm than good, then maybe give them some more space. Like, you literally just don't stop trying, though. Give space in between the tries, but just try to get to know their depression and then be that source of goodness here and there. That's really what I've seen done with me that has helped. Has been different sources of goodness here and there and giving me space in between tries.
Okay, great. Yeah. Thank you for those tips, because I think a lot of people that see their loved ones struggling, whether it's with addiction or mental health issues, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to help. So thank you for that. I think that'll be really helpful for people to hear. As for those that are struggling, do you have any advice or words of wisdom for those that are battling mental health issues, mental illness, addiction, suicidal ideation?
I think the thing that gave me my miracle, like if you're in a spot where you just know you need some sort of miracle, even if you're not a spiritual person, like you need something big, whatever it is, for your life to change, or if you're in a spot where you have no hope that life will change. I think the biggest thing that shifted my life was all of a sudden I got desperate enough to be open to possibilities. And I didn't put any sort of opinions as to what that could be. I just knew I needed something big. I let that drive me to where that could be. All of a sudden, I'm open to what can be. I have sort of an intuition that's telling me I need to talk. All of a sudden, I need to talk about things. So that's what I went with. After deciding I needed to talk about things, I had like an intuitive feeling I need to pray. And because I never prayed. I mean, I grew up in church here and there, but I hated church. I had things about church that didn't settle well with me. But all of a sudden, my gut said, just have a simple prayer. So I had that simple prayer. I just kept going with my intuition. But the openness, just simple questioning, is this truth? Is this depression truth? Are these thoughts true? What got me to these thoughts? Like, just that openness of in the questioning is what led me to my miracle. So I would just say, maybe work on having an openness and going with what feelings stir inside of you. I think we all have the power of healing and have the power of saving ourselves. And it really takes us owning that, even with therapy and friends and family, even with miracles, it's still going to be up to you. And sometimes that's daunting and overwhelming, but it's also very empowering once you realize what that means. Just that openness. You have the intuition inside of you. You have books to read that people, have been through this. where you can probably find something that'll resonate inside of you. You have my email address in the show notes if you want to
Mm-hmm.
ask questions. There's going to be something that someone's been through that's for you that you can kind of follow their guide until you see your own guide.
Absolutely. Beth, thank you so much. This has been such an amazing conversation. I think that people are really going to resonate with it and find it to be so valuable. Thank you so much for being open and honest and vulnerable and sharing your experiences. It's just so important to spread that message and to share your experiences and how you've healed because it will definitely help somebody else. Thank you so much. And can you tell everybody where to find you? And I will put everything in the show notes.
Yeah, thank you so much. My website is healingaddict.com, just spelled normal, healingaddict.com. My email address is beth@healingaddict.com. Get me through there, anything, for any reason.
Perfect. Everyone, those are in the show notes. Go check out Beth. Go contact her. If you want somebody to talk to, check out her website. Beth, thank you so much. And I'm really looking forward to your book coming out. So please keep us posted on that process.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Beth, thank you so much for coming on and talking with us and being so open and honest about your struggles with addiction and depression and anxiety. I really appreciate it. And I know a lot of people can relate to a lot of what you were speaking about. Everyone, make sure you go check out Beth and all of the wonderful books that she recommended. Everything is in the show notes. I would greatly appreciate it if you shared this episode, share it with a loved one, a family member, a friend, someone that you think could benefit from hearing Beth's story. Share it on social media. Make sure you tag me at The Wellness Project with Des. And please, I would greatly appreciate it if you could go into iTunes and leave a review for my podcast. I would so appreciate that. It helps to get the word out about my podcast and helps with my rating. Make sure you also sign up for my newsletter so that you could have me in your inbox every week with more mental health tips, strategies, behind the scenes, and you will be the first to hear about any offers I have in the works. All the links are in the show notes. Thank you so much for tuning in today, and I will see you soon with another incredible guest.